As much as I love to get out into nature to do landscape and wildlife photography, there's a time of the year here in Michigan in late autumn where I just want to say forget about it. In November, after the leaves have fallen from the trees and we haven't yet had a proper snowfall, everything looks devoid of color, a little brown and bleak, and even a bit desolate. Even the sky stays gray on most days, and even the wildlife that I take so much pleasure in photographing seems so much more scarce at this time of the year. So many of the birds have migrated south for the winter, and even my encounters with squirrels seem less frequent. I have to admit that it's hard to find the motivation to get out and find interesting compositions when there's not much scope for my imagination. I love getting out into the fresh air and photographing the beauty of nature, and every other time of the year it seems so effortless. In the spring, when the trees and leaves are starting to bud, and the grass is a beautiful shade of peridot green, and the robins have returned north from southern migration, I can spend hours finding gorgeous compositions. And in the heat of the summer, when the flowers are in full bloom, attracting hummingbirds and butterflies, I'm never at a loss for finding an interesting composition. And in early autumn, when the leaves change to golden, crimson, jewel tones, the world becomes a magical place for me and my camera. And in the dead of winter, when the bare branches of trees are covered with fresh snow, I'm more than thrilled to capture their stately splendor with my camera. But in that dreary period of late autumn, I'm often left perplexed in trying to compose a beautiful shot out in nature. My instinct during this time is to stay indoors and photograph my cats in front of the Christmas tree, trying to get perfectly round bokeh balls. But after a while, I always get that yearning to go outdoors. Even when the temperatures start to fall to around 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and my fingers tend to get numb and make it more difficult to operate a camera, I still find it exhilarating to be out in nature. And as I've gotten older, I realize that life goes by really quickly, and avoiding an entire season of landscape photography just because I can't readily find the aesthetic beauty in it seems like such a waste of precious time. A few weeks ago, before we had our first snowfall, my brother invited me to go to the nature park. When I looked out the window, the sky was so dark and overcast. All the leaves had fallen from the trees, and the ground was completely brown and lifeless. I did want to get out and get some walking in, but I wondered if I should take my camera. What could I possibly photograph out there? All of the beautiful autumn leaves were already gone, and most of the birds had already flown south for the winter. But I decided to take along my Sony a7 IV and my Sigma 100 to 400mm lens, just in case I ran across a squirrel I could photograph. I also decided to challenge myself by trying to find some interesting compositions in the bare trees. Sometimes they can make quite interesting shapes, like the trunk of an elephant or a graceful ballerina. And if the sun ever decided to come out, maybe I'd close down my aperture and get some sun stars. Or perhaps I could do an existential study on dead leaves, how they symbolize the fragility of life. Nah, that's a little too deep for me. Before I went to the nature park, I decided to fill up the bird feeder. I hadn't seen any birds around for a few weeks, so I wasn't going to bother. But I'm glad I did, because what I saw next made me realize this was not a season to avoid getting outdoors to do photography. Admittedly, I don't know much about the different migration patterns of the species of birds around here, but I was delighted to see a blue jay. And then a cardinal. and then a family of sparrows. Now I was excited to get to the nature park. If my backyard was providing me with this much photographic inspiration, what was I going to find there? When we got to the nature park at Metro Beach, it was just beginning to snow. The temperature was falling to around 19 degrees Fahrenheit, and I was so glad I brought my warm winter coat. Even though the woods lacked the vibrant autumn colors they had worn just a few weeks ago, there was a serene beauty about the place. We were the only people on the trail, and everything was still and quiet. I was so captivated by the peacefulness of my surroundings that I really wasn't thinking about photography too much. And then I saw it, a deer less than 10 feet away from me. It's not completely rare for me to see a deer, but not this close. I suddenly remembered my camera and I started to take a few shots. Even though I didn't get the deer perfectly in focus, this incident reinforced the idea that you really shouldn't avoid going out to do photography just because it looks gloomy. Encountering this single deer made the entire trip worthwhile, but we didn't know we were in store for so much more. I was not expecting to see an entire herd of deer crossing the roadway. Whenever you take the initiative to leave the house with your camera, you never know what sort of unique and interesting situations you might find yourself in. I've come to realize that so much of photography depends on being in the right place at the right time. And if I stay indoors throughout November and December photographing my cats in front of the Christmas tree, what could I be missing? Regardless of the season, it's so important to get outdoors and get some natural sunlight, especially if you're suffering from seasonal affective disorder during this time of the year. The more vitamin D you can get, the better. You may not be able to get an incredible photo during every trip, but it's still so healthy just to be out there. If you like this video, give it a like, consider subscribing for more photography-related content from a newbie like me. God bless.